Alright, in this video today I'm going to show you how to get the virtual texture setup working for my Pacific Northwest Stylized Nature Pack. So right here I have just created a new Unreal project and added my nature pack to it. And if you have done this, the first thing you'll notice is that the grass appears to be broken, and that is because this is a brand new Unreal Engine project and I have not enabled virtual texture support yet. So by default, this setting is off in new Unreal projects. As a side note, I am using Unreal Engine 5.2 for this video. However, the pack is also compatible with 5.1, and there should be no difference in the virtual texture setup between those two engine versions. So the first thing I want to do to get this pack working properly is to enable virtual texture support. And this is the most important step, because if this is not enabled, none of the following steps will make any difference. So to enable virtual texture support in a new project, all we have to do is go into Edit, Project Settings, and you'll get this window. And up in the search bar here, I'm just going to type in virtual textures, and you'll get this virtual textures drop down, and the first one here, enable virtual texture support. I'm going to go ahead and enable this, and it's going to ask me to restart the engine. So we're going to do that right now. Okay, and we are back. We have just restarted our engine after enabling virtual texture support. So if we just go ahead and double check that by, again, searching virtual textures in the project settings, we can see that we have our virtual texture support enabled now. So you'll notice that when you restart the engine, it's going to open up to this default open world map. That is because under our maps and modes here, that is our editor startup map default is open world. So if you want it to open up automatically into a certain level, you can pick that level from the drop down. This is the demo level that is included with the Pacific Northwest pack. So we can set it to that, and next time we open the editor, it will open to that level. So let's go ahead and look at what that level looks like now with virtual texture support enabled. Just give it a minute to load in the landscape and everything. And now we see our grass is working properly, and it is taking the color of the landscape underneath it, which I can just quickly demonstrate. If we come in here to our landscape mode, come into paint, and now you'll see here, these are all of our landscape painting layers. We currently have, the way I built it was with 3 different color layers for the grass. So right now how it works is if you paint in any of these 3 slots, grass will spawn and it will take up the color of the grass. Material D layer here is for dirt and E is for sand, and the way I have it currently set up, no grass will spawn on these layers, but of course you can always jump into the master material and edit it as you need. So now what happens with these virtual textures is if I paint a different color, say this material A is a slightly lighter, more yellow-green, if I come in here and paint on my landscape, the grass will disappear for a second while I'm painting, but you can see now that the grass is now taken up the color of that landscape. So that's great and all, but how do we set this up in a brand new scene? And that's really what we're here to talk about. So I'm just going to walk you through the steps of doing that. Again, the most important step is to do that first step of enabling virtual texture support in the project settings. But let's go ahead and make a new level, and we're going to choose basic here, and we're just going to hit create. I don't want to save that change. Okay. So this is our new basic level. We just have the skybox and everything and the floor. I'm going to go ahead and first delete this floor because we need to put in a landscape for this to work on. So up in the selection mode, I'm going to change this to landscape. And I'm just going to use the default, settings for this. We don't have to do anything fancy, obviously. For your own project, do whatever you want. I'm not going to put a material in this slot right now, and you'll see why in just a second. I'm just going to go ahead and create it. Okay, so now we have our landscape here. I'm not going to do any sculpting just yet because I want to show you an issue that you may run into with the virtual textures regarding the sculpting, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. Okay, so I also have written instructions for this if you prefer, and I will link that down in the video description. And I'm basically following the guidelines that I have laid out through that for this video, but For the most part, the order in which you do these things doesn't fully matter as long as all of these steps are done. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is that your landscape master material and your grass material both must have a virtual texture setup. Now, if you're using this pack and the one I made, this is already done for you. But just in case you've come across this video and you're trying to use this in your own setup or a different pack, I just wanted to point that out. So let's just quickly look at what that looks like. I'm not going to go over step by step how to do that, set that node setup, but I just want you to have a awareness. So we have our virtual textures right in here with this node, the runtime virtual texture output, and this is in our landscape master material. Now in here we also have our landscape grass outputs. This is what is controlling how the grass is spawned. And in our grass master material here, we also have our virtual texture set up here. So again, I'm not going to go over that. There's plenty of resources available on how to set up virtual textures, but I will also link some of the Unreal documentation to that. So most importantly is that you have to have those setups complete. So that's already done for us if you're using this pack. So for each scene you want to use this grass with, you need to make 2 new runtime virtual textures in the content browser. So let's look at how to do that. The first thing I'm going to do is actually save out this level because just for my own organizational purposes, I usually put the RVTs in with the paint layer information in the shader assets folder that Unreal generates. So the best way to do that is to save the level first. I'm going to put it inside this maps folder. And let's call it VT tutorial and hit save. Okay, so we will move the RVTs to the correct folder location later when this folder is generated for us, but for now we can just put them right here next to it. So I'm going to right click in the content browser and I'm going to go to the texture window and I'm going to choose runtime virtual texture. So now we need to make 2 of these. One of these is going to be for the world height and the other is going to be for the color. So let's go ahead and name this RVT for runtime virtual texture underscore height. And I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this and name this one RVT underscore color. Okay, so as far as settings for this goes, I'm just going to double click to open this up. And I'm going to increase this to, I think, 2048 and this to 1024. And this is our height texture. So we want, the most important thing here is to change this virtual texture content dropdown. Change it from this one that says base color, normal roughness specular, change it to world height. And go ahead and click save and close that. And then in the color one, we're going to do the same settings up here that we did for the last one, but we can leave this one alone. So go ahead and click save and close that out. Okay, so these are going to be our new RVTs that we're going to use in this level. And actually, because you kind of need to make new ones for each scene that you plan to use this virtual texture setup with, I'm actually going to give these a better name just so I know what they are a little bit better. We're going to call this tutorial color. And I'm actually going to name this one tutorial underscore height, just because I have a couple RVTs in this pack already to get the demo scene working, and I just don't want to get confused as to which is which. Okay. So now we need to talk about the grass here. So I have, in the pack, I have included 2 grass clump meshes. There's like a smaller one and a larger one. And you can see kind of here in the preview that the material is a little bit funky because it's trying to use virtual textures, but it can't sample from anything in this preview. So don't worry too much if they're not appearing correctly here. So we need to make a new material instance for the grass that we're going to use in this specific scene. And that's because we have to have our runtime virtual texture separated per scene. So each time you want to instance a material on this, it needs to be for that specific scene. So let's come into materials here. And the way that I'm going to do this is just by duplicating the existing grass materials that I have. You can see I have one in here for the demo, which was the level we opened up with. I also have one in here for the overview, which is just the level that's included with this pack that lays the kit out for you. And I have a little small example of the grass. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate. It doesn't matter. These are the same, basically. So I'm just going to duplicate one of these, and it's going to be called MI for material instance, grass underscore tutorial. Okay, so let's open up this material instance. And yeah, it's not going to look properly here in the preview, obviously, because the virtual textures are dependent on the scene. So here I have some parameters, and you can play with these at will. Most of these are visual, you know, things like the wind line color, but the one we need to look at right here is our virtual texture. So you'll see that by default, this one has a color in it. So we just want to change this RVT color to the color one we just made. So we're going to click the drop down, and we can see here RVT tutorial color, which is the one we just made. So go ahead and click that. And we're going to save and close that up. Okay, so now that we have our runtime virtual textures created in our content browser here, and we have it set up in our grass material instance, we now need to talk about landscape grass types. So if you are using the painted foliage system, which you access down here, this sort of next section isn't really germane to that. And you should be able to change out the instance and just paint, and it should just work. But if you're using the procedural landscape grass types, the way I have it set up in the demo, there's a few extra steps that you need to do. So I have my landscape grass types for my different levels. I have sort of the overview levels in a separate folder, and then these are the ones I use in the demo. So we need to, if you look at these grass types, you can open up the individual content files, and you can see here's our static mesh, and it's going to use, right now it's not overriding any material, so it's going to use whatever the default material is for that mesh, which if we come and look at it, is our demo grass. So obviously the demo grass is for the demo level, and we want it new. So I don't want to change it here, because if I change the default material here, it's going to break the demo level. So instead what I want to do is override these materials in the landscape grass type. So because I want to preserve my demo level as is and have it still work, the way that I'm going to do that is instead of overriding it in these ones, I'm just going to duplicate these. And let's give them names that we can track by just putting tutorial on all of these. Okay, so now we have our 3 tutorial landscape grass types. And if you recall, it's 3 landscape grass types because I have 3 layers on that landscape material that I created that control the 3 different colors of grass for variation. Now, if you have a different setup or you only want one color for grass, you won't need all of this. So the next thing we need to do is open all of these up. Here's O1, here's O2, here's O3. And now in these duplicated ones that are specific to our tutorial level, this is where we're going to do our override material. So we're going to click the plus button, and for this one, we're going to choose the grass material instance that we just made for this tutorial. And don't forget to do it for both. So I have 2 array elements here in my landscape grass type. That is because I have one of these smaller clumps, these grass O1. And then I have this larger one, which is grass O2. So make sure you do it for both. Okay, save. And then we're just going to do it for all 3 types. Tutorial, here we go. And tutorial. All right, and one more. And last one, one array element, grass tutorial. Great. Okay. So that's all set up now. Now we need to actually set up these landscape grass types to work with our material. Now, unfortunately, the way that this procedural grass works in Unreal, there's currently no way that I'm aware of to turn these into some sort of parameter which you can change in a material instance. So these grass types are set here in this landscape grass output node in the master material, but again, I don't know of a way that exposes these to the material instance. If you do know of a way, by the way, leave it in the comments because I would love to know and update this, because unfortunately what this means is that for each new scene that we want to use this setup for, we have to create a new master material, which is kind of a pain, and I really hope that Unreal changes that in the future. So I just duplicated that landscape master material, not the material instance, the master material, and we are gonna give it a name that we can track. And I'm gonna open this up. And right now it is an exact copy of my original, but all I need to change in here is come in, click on this landscape grass output node, and we're gonna change each of these from just our demo default one to the tutorial one. So this grass 01 is gonna become grass 01 tutorial, grass 02 tutorial, and grass 03 tutorial. There it is. Okay. Go ahead and hit apply and close this out. Now, it is going to be much easier on you if you also make a new material instance to put on this landscape. So I'm going to right click on the new master material I made, and I'm going to click create material instance, and we can name it properly. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to give it the prefix of MI for material instance. And just so I can stay organized, I'm going to take it out of my masters folder and just put it in my materials folder with my other material instances. So here it is right here, and here are our other two instances. So this is what is actually going to go onto our landscape. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to click on the landscape in the 3D viewport, bring up the details, and where it says landscape material here, we can just pop in our tutorial material. Now it'll be all black and shiny. This is to be expected. We don't have any paint layers set up for this yet, but we'll do that in just a minute. Okay, so the other really important thing that you need to do at this stage is with the landscape selected in the details panel, we need to scroll down or search until we see something called draw in virtual textures. This is really easy to forget because it's sort of buried down in the details panel, but we need to create two array elements under this. And in the first one, we're going to drop our height that we made for this level. And the second one, we're going to drop our color. Now, this won't do anything just yet, but it's all going to come together at the end. Just hang in there. Okay. So now that we have done that part, the other really important thing that is easy, I think, to forget or not realize is that we need an actual virtual texture volume in this level, and we actually need two of them. So I'm going to open up the place actors panel right here, and I'm going to type in virtual texture. It's also under the volumes tab, and we'll get this runtime virtual texture volume. So we're going to drag one in to our level, and it looks, you know, it's a volume. It doesn't really do anything just yet. So you can rename them if you like, but we only do need two per level. So in the details panel here, what we're going to do is we're going to drag the height into the virtual texture here. And now, as I said earlier in the video, the order of these steps doesn't totally matter, but this is one case where that is not true. We need to drag a texture into this slot before we set our bounds here. Otherwise, it just won't work. I'm not sure why. It's just the way it is. So our bounds align actor, this is basically saying, like, where do we want to draw this texture? And we want to draw this texture everywhere in the landscape. So I'm going to click the eyedropper here and select our landscape, and I'm going to hit set bounds. And what that has done, it has scaled the runtime virtual texture volume to the bounds of the landscape. You can kind of see here on the horizon that it's now matches the size of the landscape. Okay, so we need one more volume in here, so let's do the same thing. We're going to drag in a runtime virtual texture volume, but in this one we're going to put our color into the virtual texture slot, select our landscape, and hit set bounds. Okay, so why do we not have any grass or anything? That's because we don't have any paint layers. So the last thing we really need to do here is come in to the landscape mode, come into the paint slot, and now we need to add our paint layers here. So I like material B as like the base. Whatever paint slot you add first, it will populate the entire landscape with that layer. So I like to do B first because it's kind of like the middle value grass. So I'm going to hit this plus and hit normal, and it's going to generate this folder for you, which is fine. And I'm just going to hit save. So now we are populated with our grass, or our grass layer, I should say. We're not actually seeing any grass yet. So this is just a quirk of Unreal. Everything should be working out fine here. You just have to sculpt a little bit to make it work. And now, what is happening here with this black grass? So I definitely wanted to cover this in this video because I think it is like a really easy thing to do and not understand what's happening. What is happening here with this big black splotch is our runtime virtual texture volumes, these ones that are in the level, we scaled them to the size of the landscape, but when we did that, our landscape was flat. So basically what's happening here is our landscape is coming outside of the top of our runtime virtual texture volumes, and it's no longer able to generate the proper color. So just to fix this, and this can happen at any point while you're working with your landscape, it's a super simple fix. All you have to do is do this for each of these volumes. Select the volume, come into the details, hit set bounds again, and it's fixed. And you just want to make sure that you do that for each of them, because now when you look, you'll see that the bounds are scaled properly to the height of your landscape. Okay, so that is how we get our runtime virtual textures set up. You can see the grass here, and it's taking on the color, and it's maybe a little bit easier to see if we add wrong one. If we add a new paint layer, we can paint in here now, and it will populate, and the grass will take up the color. So I hope this has been helpful for you all. Leave any questions that you have in the comments. I'm also going to link some of the documentation on virtual textures in the description of the video, and I hope this was helpful. Oh, and by the way, this pack, as well as some others I have made, are available for purchase on the Unreal Engine Marketplace. Link is going to be in the description.